What happens when both the food on your plate and the jobs in your town vanish at the same time recently? Over 40,000 American farms have shut down because of the trade tariffs that crippled exports and flooded markets with foreign alternatives. These were multi-generational lands that fed a nation. And now, as silos sit full with no buyers and dairy gets poured down drains, the aftershock is hitting your dinner tray. That leads to even the biggest fast food chains like Wendys, KFC, and McDonald's closing hundreds of locations, unable to absorb the soaring costs of ingredients. Could this be the silent unraveling of the American meal? From farm to fryer. Have you ever considered that the death of U.S. agriculture is dragging down the last places working Americans could afford to eat? This is the Downturn Report, where the truth gets personal. And today we reveal 10 big fast food restaurant chains are going out of business because of the farm's fall down. Let's begin with an old friend. Number 1, Wendys. When over 40,000 American farms collapse. Your burger might still look the same, but the meat inside could be a different kind of meat. That's not just a recipe change, but a warning. There was a time when every square patty at Wendys reminded people that something could still be trusted. A hot baked potato with sour cream, a bowl of chili that warmed your fingers on a cold day, and beef that came from the heartland. These were small but sturdy comforts. For workers after a tired day or retirees watching every dollar, Wendys was one of the last places where a hot meal still felt like it came from American soil. But now, those memories are cracking, at its peak. Wendys operated more than 6,700 restaurants globally. Most U.S. locations proudly sourced beef from states like Nebraska, Iowa, and Kansas. But by early 2025, over 400 Wendys locations had closed since 2022. Rural and small-town branches were hit the hardest, with revenue in those areas dropping more than 8%. Behind that collapse lies something deeper than just fewer customers. It's about the loss of the land itself. In 2024 alone, beef availability in the U.S. dropped by 14%, according to USDA data. Farm bankruptcies surged as cattle feed prices soared and export deals crumbled. Across the Midwest, hundreds of local ranches shut down quietly, replaced by silence and foreign imports. Wendys, once a symbol of fresh, never frozen, was forced to shift away from domestic suppliers. As sourcing costs ballooned, the company made cuts elsewhere. Menu quality dropped, prices went up, but executive paychecks remained untouched. The corporate machine, still chasing profit, chose cheaper beef from overseas, even as local farmers packed up their barns for good. And when Wendys vanishes from a town, it's not just a missing signboard, but a broken link in people's everyday lives. For many elderly Americans, a baked potato and a small coffee meant a place to sit down and not feel rushed. For part-time workers, it was a meal that didn't require cooking or budgeting for gas. In states like Missouri and Kentucky, where fast food often replaces a home kitchen, losing Wendys means hunger knocking at the door earlier each month, fewer job options, longer commutes for basic meals, and towns growing darker each night. If this pattern holds, the damage could echo far beyond just one chain. With domestic farms dying and fast food chains importing more and more, we could be staring at a country where nothing on the plate is truly American anymore. That's not just a supply issue, more like an identity fracture. The local farmer and the local customer are being pushed to opposite ends of a system that no longer connects them. Once, you could taste the homeland in your meal. Now, that taste is being priced out, outsourced, and forgotten. And the question is no longer just about beef, but about whether this country still feeds its own. Number 2, KFC. In just 3 years, over 4,000 American chicken farms vanished. Yet most people only noticed when their local KFC shut down. But by the time the neon sign went dark, the damage had already reached their plates, their paychecks, and their pantries. For generations, KFC wasn't just a meal, but a memory. The red and white bucket showed up at dinners, church gatherings, and family picnics. It was a flavor deeply tied to the South, to farmland, to something still made with care. Parents shared it with their kids. Grandparents brought it home to make holidays easier. KFC wasn't fancy, but it was filling and proudly American. Now, that fried comfort is fading fast. At its height, KFC had over 4,400 restaurants in the US, but between 2021 and early 2025, more than 250 have closed, often without warning. in southern and midwestern towns, according to Restaurant Business annual reports. And the biggest blows aren't happening in cities. They're landing in the places where KFC was once a reliable stop on a rural highway or a family's weekly treat. Behind each shuttered location lies something much darker: the collapse of the very farms that once fed it. Between 2022 and 2024, over 4,000 poultry farms across Arkansas, Georgia, and Mississippi shut down. Feed prices shot up due to crop failures and global tariff wars. Tyson Foods began shifting to massive, automated mega farms, crushing small producers as costs mounted. KFC quietly began importing chicken from Brazil and Thailand, triggering backlash in farming communities that had once raised the very birds served in their buckets. Could it be an abandonment Yum Brands, instead of fighting for American suppliers, chose convenience? Executives approved over $23 million in bonuses in 2024, even as store managers were being let go and longtime employees handed severance envelopes. Farmers, customers, and workers all watched as one of the most iconic chains in the country turned its back, while smiling through a foreign supply chain. And the human cost is hard to calculate. A store closure means no after-school jobs. It also means one less hot meal for a fixed-income family in central Kentucky, where chickens once filled the fields. It means nothing on the shelves but canned beans and overpriced freezer dinners. In these communities, KFC's exit is a warning shot. First, the farms disappear, then the restaurants, and then the meals themselves. Experts say that it's a double loss most Americans never saw coming. Not just a lost flavor, but a lost livelihood, when the chicken no longer comes from your county and the chain no longer employs your neighbor. Food becomes a foreign transaction, as Chick-fil-A builds loyalty by staying close to U.S. farms. KFC fades into silence. The question now isn't whether it tastes the same, but whether it even belongs to us anymore. But if you thought fried chicken was sacred, what comes next will hit even closer to home, because the next brand is the biggest name in America fast food's history. Yet they seem like walking away from us now. Number 3, McDonald's. There was once a time when McDonald's meant more than a meal. The Golden Arches welcomed travelers, workers, and families alike. An Egg McMuffin at sunrise in the airport. A Happy Meal after a Little League win. A $1 coffee before a double shift. It didn't matter where you lived, there was always one nearby. But lately, that quiet comfort is starting to disappear. Not all at once, but one location, one ingredient, one memory at a time. McDonald's used to stand like a giant across the country, with more than 14,000 locations serving nearly 25 million Americans every day. It was the largest restaurant chain in the United States, reliable, fast, and affordable. But between 2022 and 2025, over 500 stores have permanently closed, with a shocking number located in working-class towns across Missouri, Indiana, and Alabama, in tourism hubs like Orlando and Las Vegas. Foot traffic dropped 18% in just 1 year. International growth halted too. More than 1,000 planned projects scrapped because global markets were too unpredictable. But the real reason runs deeper. The collapse of American farms has quietly torn apart McDonald's supply chain. Dairy farms in Wisconsin and Minnesota dumped thousands of gallons of milk in 2023 when China slapped a 34% tariff on U.S. exports. Beef producers in Kansas and Nebraska, faced with skyrocketing feed prices and lost contracts, either downsized or shut down entirely. Without those farms, McDonald's scrambled. The result: cheddar cheese from New Zealand, beef trimmings from Brazil, pickles processed in Thailand. That once familiar flavor, soft bun, creamy cheese, salty meat, isn't quite the same anymore. And all this happened while McDonald's CEO received over $20 million in bonuses in 2024. For many, that stings. Because when a McDonald's closes, it's not just a burger that disappears. It's a low-income people's extra job to pay rent. It's the only drive-thru open past 9 p.m. And also the only place where seniors could sit for coffee and feel seen. Now, those windows are shuttered, and the prices, which used to be $5 for a full combo, now pushes past $8.79, making even basic meals feel out of reach. But most people don't mention the double loss. The farm that used to raise the cow is gone, and so is the restaurant that once served the meat. The supply chain is broken in two, and everyday Americans are the ones stuck in the middle, trying to hold the pieces. What once was dependable now feels hollow. And while McDonald's still operates, what remains may no longer feel like McDonald's. Newer chains like Five Guys are rising, not because they're cheaper, but because they've kept their ties to American farms. The price is higher, but the trust is still intact. If the food no longer tastes like the America we remember, then what are we really eating? And maybe worse, what parts of ourselves have we already let go? Number 4, Burger King. In parts of America, you'll now find something haunting. A Burger King drive-thru frozen in time, menu still lit, fryer grease long cold, and a sign offering 2 Whoppers for $6. Even though the doors have been locked for months, the king has left his castle, and no one seems to be coming back. There was a time when picking Burger King over McDonald's felt like a better choice. It wasn't just about the flame-grilled taste, but about having it your way. Extra onions, a paper crown for the kids, fries comfort you. For millions used to grabbing a warm bite, Burger King was their anchor. Cheap, quick, familiar. But from 2022 to 2025, that anchor has quietly rusted away. Over 400 US Burger King locations have permanently shut their doors, especially across the agricultural belt, in states like Kentucky, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, where small towns depended on both farms and fast food. The disappearance is a fracture in the everyday rhythm of life. The numbers reveal a storm beneath the surface. According to Restaurant Dive and franchisee filings, more than 120 Burger King operators have downsized or filed for debt relief in the last 3 years. Why? Because their food, beef, lettuce, potatoes, no longer came cheap or easy. Family farms across the Midwest went under as export markets collapsed. The tariffs imposed in late 2018 triggered retaliation from China and the EU, slashing corn and soybean shipments and raising feed prices. That wave hit beef ranchers, then the suppliers, and finally landed on the Whopper itself to survive. Burger King's parent company, Restaurant Brands International, chose a future that many customers never asked for. In 2023, RBI began automating stores with kiosks, trimming the menu, and offshoring ingredients to Argentina and Brazil. Quality dropped, prices rose, trust evaporated. Franchisees, many of them immigrant small business owners, could no longer balance labor costs, supplier chaos, and a shrinking customer base. In the words of one anonymous franchisee from Georgia, they called it modernization, we called it goodbye, and the pain isn't abstract. When a Burger King in Mississippi shutters, the community loses a 24-hour food stop, a $12 an hour job disappears, the only hot breakfast under $5 vanishes, and in these moments, the loss is about access. Working parents find themselves scrambling for dinner. Seniors settle for canned soup. Truckers reroute for a warm meal that no longer exists. The crown, once worn with pride, now feels like an echo of something lost. Burger King is drifting. It has no roots left in the communities it once served. It has no plan to rebuild what's broken. And as competitors like Culver's and Jack in the Box double down on domestic sourcing and local hiring, Burger King seems content to shrink into irrelevance. What happens when the food is no longer grown here, when the Whopper hits $10, and the worker behind the counter is replaced by a screen? What's left isn't fast food, but fast forgetting. A brand without roots and a crown with no kingdom. But if you think beef chains are suffering, wait until you see what's happening to the next chain, where shortages, wheat imports, and bankrupt farmers are leaving ovens cold and communities hungry. Number 5, Popeyes. Somewhere in the deep south tonight, a family is driving to the Popeyes they've always trusted, only to find the lights off, the doors locked, and a faded sign that reads, "Closed for renovations." But there are no renovations. There's just another shuttered store, another missing meal, and another quiet goodbye to something that once felt deeply, unmistakably American. Popeyes wasn't just fast food, it was a bite of home. That spicy chicken sandwich, born in 2019, was a cultural anchor for warehouse workers clocking out late, for families grabbing dinner, for single parents feeding kids on a budget. Popeyes was flavor, pride, and familiarity, all under $6, but that warmth is vanishing. Between late 2022 and mid-2025, over 180 Popeyes restaurants across the US have permanently shut down. According to Restaurant Business and Insider, the hardest hit areas, the very places that built its reputation, Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana. The collapse is not random. It began in the fields. Thousands of small chicken farms across Arkansas, Alabama, and Georgia disappeared between 2021 and 2024. Feed prices soared as tariffs disrupted grain imports. China cut U.S. poultry imports. Farmers who once raised chickens for Popeyes faced two options: sell out to corporate processors or shut down entirely. Many chose to walk away. And Popeyes, unable to secure enough affordable domestic supply, made a quiet pivot. It began importing pre-processed chicken from Thailand and South America. In 2024, TikTok users started posting videos about changes in Popeyes' taste. Meat was tougher, texture was inconsistent, rumors swirled, and watchdogs confirmed the chicken no longer came from southern soil. For a brand built on Louisiana kitchen identity, the betrayal cut deep. Customers noticed, franchisees struggled, and corporate, rather than helping, added salt to the wound. Salt to the Popeyes parent company. RBI approved a $35 million global executive bonus pool that same year, even as local workers were laid off and small-town locations quietly vanished from the map. When Popeyes closes, it's a loss of community, with no replacement. These towns are left with overpriced groceries, empty storefronts, and families forced to stretch instant noodles into dinner. The farm that raised the chicken is gone, and so is the kitchen. The entire chain is cracked, and as that chain breaks, so does a way of life that once held these communities together. Meanwhile, Chick-fil-A, despite all its cultural controversies, has stood firm on domestic sourcing and franchise protection. Their lines still wrap around the block, their prices hold, their trust, however conditional, still exists. Popeyes, on the other hand, is fading. What used to taste like Southern resilience now tastes like cost-cutting. And if even fried chicken, the comfort food of the working-class South, can be outsourced and gutted, what food is still ours? But before we answer that, let's turn to another big brand now, fighting to survive in a world where even pasta has a price too high to swallow. Number 6, Boston Market. In a world where fast food meant paper-wrapped burgers and deep-fried sameness, Boston Market stood out like a warm kitchen light at the end of a hard day. It was where mashed potatoes came with real butter, where mac and cheese actually stretched with melted cheese, and where even on a tight paycheck, a full plate of chicken, cornbread, and vegetables still felt like a dinner with dignity. For families who couldn't afford time or expensive groceries, Boston Market was the one place that gave them a meal that looked, smelled, and tasted like home. Now, those ovens have gone quiet. Back in the 1990s, Boston Market was everywhere, over 1,100 locations, from bustling cities to quiet suburbs. It promised comfort food for working people, and for a time, it delivered. But by mid-2024, fewer than 300 locations remained open. Over 90 stores were shut down in just the past 2 years, with the steepest losses in states like Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Michigan, places where retirees, factory workers, and low-income families had come to rely on it. And while the signs may have come down quietly, the impact couldn't be louder. Boston Market's collapse is tangled with the collapse of the American farm. The chain didn't run on imported beef or artificial fillers, it ran on potatoes from Idaho, milk from Wisconsin, green beans from Ohio. But when over 40,000 farms across the U.S. shut down due to lost export markets, fuel hikes, and feed inflation, the raw ingredients that once kept Boston Market affordable became luxury items. From 2022 to 2024, bulk potato prices surged by nearly 37%. Dairy climbed 29%. Suddenly, mac and cheese wasn't cheap anymore, and comfort wasn't free. Meanwhile, Engage Brands, the parent company behind Boston Market, faced a storm of lawsuits in 2023: unpaid wages, missed vendor payments, and reports of employees working months without checks. In New Jersey and New York, over 300 staff walked out or sued instead of fixing the cracks. The company slashed supply budgets, axed full menus, and closed locations mainly in working-class areas. The very people who depended on those hot meals were left without so much as a notice. For seniors on Social Security, Boston Market was often the only place to get meat, starch, and a vegetable under $8. For veterans, widows, or disabled residents, it wasn't just convenience, it was their kitchen. Its closures mean more than empty chairs and shuttered storefronts. They mean fewer warm meals, fewer jobs for part-time students and seniors, and a cruel narrowing of food choices in already overlooked neighborhoods. While chains like Cracker Barrel adapted with take-home groceries and Golden Corral leaned into large family dining. Boston Market faded without a fight. And what disappeared wasn't just a brand, it was a promise. A promise that working Americans, no matter how hard life got, could still sit down to something that felt whole. Because when the potatoes no longer come from Idaho, and the milk no longer flows from Wisconsin, when the hot meal on the corner vanishes, without anyone replacing it, what comfort remains for the people who need it most? And if even the places that once served food like home have become unaffordable, what kind of future are we feeding ourselves into number 7? Hardee's, in rural America. Hardee's wasn't a treat, it was a routine. A biscuit at sunrise before loading the truck. A thick burger after 12 hours in steel-toed boots. For decades, Hardee's fed the workers who didn't have time to wait, didn't have options, and didn't have luxury. But by 2025, more than 200 Hardee's locations have closed, especially in small southern and midwestern towns, leaving behind locked doors and hungry mornings. Back in the early 2000s, Hardee's boasted over 2,500 stores, deeply embedded in states like Tennessee, Arkansas, and Missouri. But as of this year, only about 1,650 remain. According to Restaurant Business Reports, closures accelerated after agricultural collapse wiped out local pork and dairy farm suppliers of sausage, bacon, and breakfast staples. Prices spiked: pork up 22%, dairy nearly 30% between 2022 and 2024, with costs out of reach. Hardee's began importing from Canada and Mexico, resulting in longer delays, lower consistency, and taste complaints. Meanwhile, parent company CKE shifted its focus to automation and overseas processing. Frontline hours were cut, workers lost hours, customers lost trust. In many towns, Hardee's was the only place open before 7 a.m. When it disappears, welders, school bus drivers, and truckers lose more than a biscuit, they lose a daily anchor. For low-income families and retirees, it was the one hot meal that still felt accessible. Now, that anchor is gone. While Culver's grows by supporting U.S. farms, Hardee's drifts, and with it, another piece of working-class life falls away. What does it mean when even the breakfast sandwich becomes a luxury? And how many more pieces can break before something vital disappears for good number 8? Dairy Queen for generations. Dairy Queen was more than just a stop for ice cream, it was a reward, a break from routine, a reminder that something sweet was still within reach. A dipped cone after church, a blizzard on a summer drive, a banana split to mark the last day of school. But in towns across the Midwest and South, those memories are fading. Since 2022, over 300 Dairy Queen locations have quietly disappeared from the map. At its peak, DQ operated more than 4,500 U.S. locations, thriving especially in rural counties. But when dairy farms began collapsing from Wisconsin to Iowa, the chain's foundation cracked. Over 10,000 U.S. dairy farms shut down between 2022 and 2024, according to USDA data. Tariffs, feed inflation, and evaporated export markets wiped out family-run operations. Without local milk, DQ turned to shelf-stable imports and powdered mixes from overseas, triggering taste complaints and weakening local loyalty. The shift wasn't just about flavor. While American farmers dumped milk, Dairy Queen's parent company, Berkshire Hathaway, invested heavily in stores across China and the Middle East. Back home, U.S. franchisees faced higher ingredient costs and thinning margins, with little corporate relief. In 2024, internal leaks revealed new partnerships with synthetic milk manufacturers for future markets, further alienating customers in places like rural Nebraska and central Kentucky. A Dairy Queen closing doesn't just mean no ice cream. It means no first jobs for teens, no treats for seniors, no late-night stops for families. It means the last fun place in town is gone. Number 9, Arby's. Arby's was never the loudest brand, but it was loyal. It showed up where others didn't. Quiet towns, highway stops, farming communities, a roast beef sandwich after a night shift, curly fries between errands. It was food that felt solid, warm, earned. But in 2025, more than 150 Arby's restaurants have gone dark, mostly in Midwestern regions, that also lost the farms supplying the meat. According to Inspire Brands' internal reports, closures are accelerating in places that need them most. Arby's once relied on local beef, pork, and turkey from family farms in Iowa, South Dakota, and Illinois. But between 2022 and 2024, over 40,000 of those farms collapsed. Tariffs gutted export profits, feed and fuel costs soared, processors downsized, prices rose sharply, pork by over 20%, with no stable domestic supply. Arby's began importing meats from Brazil and Canada, cutting costs but changing flavor. Customers noticed. Loyalty fractured. Rather than support suppliers or franchisees, parent company Inspire Brands simplified menus and downsized portions. Internal documents from 2024 revealed discussions of lab-grown or processed meat to fill sandwiches, causing backlash from longtime fans. Yet CEO Paul Brown earned over $11 million that year, as dozens of U.S. stores closed. When an Arby's closes in rural Kansas or western Montana, it leaves nothing in its place. No jobs for teens, no meals for farm families too tired to cook, no hot lunch at the only open spot in town. With farms and fast food collapsing together, these towns are left with silence. As newer chains promote local ingredients and worker reinvestment, Arby's fades, once a symbol of real meat, now just another casualty of corporate drift, when even roast beef comes from overseas. Who exactly is Arby's feeding anymore? Number 10, Checkers and Rallies. Checkers and Rallies wasn't fancy, but it showed up where others wouldn't. In food deserts and forgotten neighborhoods. It offered hot burgers, late hours, and a $5 box that still felt like a meal. But since 2021, over 130 locations have closed, mostly in low-income urban areas like Detroit and Baton Rouge. As pork and grain supply chains collapsed, ingredient costs surged. Oil, fries, and burger blends rose more than 30%. Instead of adapting, parent firm Oak Hill Capital cut hours, laid off staff, and automated roles. Lawsuits for wage theft surfaced in multiple states. For many, Checkers was the only hot meal after midnight, the only job within walking distance. Now, storefronts sit empty, drive-through signs rusting. Unlike Sonic or Little Caesars, which evolved, Checkers fell behind and vanished. When even the cheapest burger becomes too expensive to make, what's left for those who counted on it to survive across America? The meal that once united rich and poor alike is breaking apart. From vanished farms to shuttered fast food chains. What we're witnessing isn't just economic, it's personal. These places fed families, held memories, and offered comfort. Now, they vanish without warning, leaving only silence where the community once gathered. If the last affordable meal disappears, what does that say about the country we've become, and more urgently, who will still be able to eat tomorrow?